And we're live. Welcome back to another live session. So today we're going to answer the question or help to review some of the questions that Israeli scientists have been seeking answers for. And that is comparing reinfection rates for individuals who have been prior infected compared to breakthrough cases in fully vaccinated subjects in the largest real world sample and the longest track sample database in the world. So far to date, I should say. So now, the reason why we're doing this is not to doubt or question or say that you shouldn't get immunized. I just want to make that very clear because this is something that a lot of the scientists are here talking about. We want to interpret this data with caution because I think a lot of people overestimate how healthy they actually are, underestimate the number of pre-existing or underlying health conditions or their risk factors. So we want to be very clear here, and I want to make that clear to YouTube and anyone who watches this video. This is not an anti-vaccination message whatsoever, but this message and hopefully the data from this preprint study, from the title here that we're going to talk about is, you can see it on the screen here. It's, I think, prior immunity, and based upon the data here that we're going to review very, very soon, prior immunity should count for something. And up to now, we've kind of relegated it as, well, suboptimal, insufficient. The body's natural immune system doesn't really have the capabilities of making something that is, that we have the ability now to enhance by way of immunization. And let's review the data because the data really speaks for itself. And what's unique about this data set is this data set was collected during June and up to August 14th of 2021. So this is accounting for, of course, the Delta variant. Now, we know that this Delta variant is more transmissible. We know that the CDC has published a data set looking at seeking to answer a very similar question. What are reinfection rates in individuals who are immunized versus not? And what they found is that there was a 2.56 greater odds of non-immunized people getting infected compared to individuals who had been prior exposed, but that tracking period was during May and June of this year. So let's dive into this. I think there's some really interesting findings here that also challenged my beliefs. One of the things we've talked a lot about since we started this channel, and of course during the whole pandemic, was comorbidities. And what was interesting, and this is why it's good to hear data and perspectives from different sides, even if they challenge your own biases and beliefs here, is that comorbidities did not influence the efficacy of the immunization. And that's what I thought was interesting. And I thought, wow, this is really challenging my biases. So let's dive into the study and really talk about this and talk about the nuances. And please, let's view this with an open mind. The title of this preprint that was published by Israeli scientists is Comparing SARS-CoV-2 Natural Immunity to Vaccine-Induced Immunity, Reinfections versus Breakthrough Infections. Now, what's important about this study, there was 673,000 fully vaccinated people. And what's key here, friends, is the time point at which they were vaccinated and the time point at which the individuals had a prior infection, okay? So they were the same. So individuals, in order, the data was collected, the criteria here was fully vaccinated people must have had their vaccine before the 28th of February of 2021. Now, the individuals in the group that had the prior infection must have had a prior infection before that same time point, okay? So again, we're comparing apples to apples. That's what's important, and that's what makes this study a little bit different from the CDC study that we're going to talk about here. Now, it's important, again, to view things from two different perspectives. We often get stuck in our confirmation biases, and I encourage all of you to listen to different political views, listen to different perspectives when it comes to this whole pandemic and everything so that you can, hear both sides, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Okay. So that being said, there were 662,000 individuals that had a prior infection before February of 2021. And then they had a third cohort here, and this was 42,000 individuals that had a prior infection before February 28th, 2021, but they also received one dose of the Pfizer vaccine. Okay. Now, they collected data, new infections between June and August 14th of 2021. So during this follow-up period, there was 257 cases of SARS-CoV-2 amongst all of these, 700,000 individuals, right? Some of which have been infected, some of which hadn't. And what they found is that out of these 257 recorded documented cases, these new cases, what they found was 238 occurred in the vaccinated group and 19 occurred in the previously infected group, meaning that those were reinfections. Okay, after adjusting for comorbidities, we found a statistically significant 13-fold increased risk for breakthrough infection as opposed to reinfection. So this is important to really talk about here. When you see epidemiological studies, what they are doing is we're just talking about, it's basically thinking in terms of bets. There's a book out there, I think it's called Thinking in Terms of Bets. It could be off a little bit, but we need to think about probability. These studies can't tell exactly because everyone's unique and individual and there's different variables. But what these studies are intended to look at is what are the odds or what is the probability of a breakthrough in a fully vaccinated person or a reinfection in someone who has already been exposed. And the individuals who hadn't been infected but are fully vaccinated had a higher likelihood of having a breakthrough compared to individuals who had a prior infection and having them get reinfected. Now, in both groups, there was both cases in both, but as the study says here, that 230 breakthroughs occurred. And now we need to understand this data set is very large and I'll just share with you this right here. This image so you can see this. We're talking about 673,000 fully vaccinated versus only 62,000 prior infected and unvaccinated. But again, the difference in the breakthroughs versus the reinfection was 238 breakthroughs versus 19 reinfection. Now, this is what's really important because when you talk about the vaccines, there's like ideas all over the place, right? Like this gets very controversial very quick. Now, some people actually think that if you get the vaccine, you're more likely to get sick from COVID. Obviously, that's not really true here. There's only 238 documented breakthroughs out of a data set of 673,000. So please stop spreading the idea that these vaccines don't work at all. There's obviously some breakthroughs, but there's a lot of information out there, and I tend to be more in the middle on this, and I think this is a more nuanced conversation. Now, the reason why we're sharing this video is because so many people will have had a prior infection. There's been 217 million cases throughout the world and probably many more that haven't been recorded. In the US alone, I think there's 38 million cases, right? So now there's probably 5 times as many of those cases. Now, why aren't we accounting for the fact that some people, myself included, I have antibodies and I have T-cell immunity? Shouldn't that account for something? I mean, as this data found here, individuals who had, prior immunity are much less likely to get reinfected even compared to individuals who are fully vaccinated. So again, this is real world data accounting for the Delta variant. Shouldn't prior immunity count for something? Why are we just writing this off as insignificant? Now, let me just paint to you a little picture, a little analogy. I just wanted to kind of share this with you, because we do hear that natural immunity basically sucks. It doesn't work. There's no such thing. So if this is the virus, okay, and you get exposed to this virus, and this right here is the spike protein. So this is SARS-CoV-2. This is the spike protein. Okay, when you get exposed to this, you have the virus replicates, but your immune system makes antibodies and T-cell immunity against the spike protein, against the nucleocapsid, against the envelope, against all these other factors. Right? Now it's your own immune system that's making antibodies, making the T-cell immunity, making everything, right? It's your own natural immune system. When you get immunized, your immune system is your own natural immune system that's making immunologic memory to this antigen, the spike protein. So in both cases, whether you get infected with the whole virus, which is here's the virus, here's the spike protein, there's multiple spike proteins. This is how the virus latches on to your cells through the ACE2 receptor and so forth. So either way, it's your natural immune system that makes the immunologic memory. So when people say natural immunity is BS, you're like, well, it doesn't. Again, the source of the antigen is just different. When you get immunized, you're getting the straight up antigen without any of the virulent elements of the virus. When you get exposed, you're getting potentially all the virulent elements and a lot of unknowns associated with that. What are the unknowns of SARS-CoV-2? Now, this is coming from someone who's been infected. I would have rather not have been exposed and infected because there's unknowns here with cardiovascular issue, lingering issues with regards to sort of this dormant virus that may linger in your cells. There's documented cases of now, shrinkage in gray matter in the brain. Like there's a lot of unknowns here. So we need to, again, this is where the conversation should be more nuanced and personalized based upon your age, your risk factors, your prior exposure when it comes to immunizations. So we need to understand that, friends. Now, again, this isn't an anti-vaccine message. I think the public health message is more nuanced, but it seems that, the powers that be just want to make it very simple. Everyone gets immunized no matter what. Whereas the science is a little bit more nuanced based upon our risk factors, our probability, our age, and everything like that. Okay. So let's continue on here. I just want to check in and see how we're doing. And if you're enjoying this content, you can hit that like button. I want to be very careful here because I know that when you talk about these topics, they're controversial. So if I see your comments that are egregious when it comes to immunizations, I'm going to delete them. So please do not leave any of those comments here, friends. We're trying to share information because there's tens or hundreds of millions of people who have natural immunity, and that should account for something. And I could understand if we didn't yet have the science, but now we do have the science, and it's in over 773,000 individuals in one of the most highly vaccinated countries in the world. So let's continue on here. Now, here's where I think it's important in terms of symptomatic breakthroughs and symptomatic reinfections. So as for the symptomatic SARS-CoV-2 infections during the follow-up period, 199 cases were recorded, 191 of which, again, these are 191 symptomatic cases, were in the vaccinated group compared to only 8 in the previously infected group. Again, so for all the people that say natural immunity doesn't work or anything, you're like, again, I'm reading to you verbatim what researchers in Israel and other folks here at different universities, this was a paper that we're going to talk about published in the journal Science, have talked about. So again, I'm just saying, like, shouldn't natural immunity account for something? Okay. So let's carry on and continue to talk about this. Okay, so they had 2 different models and they compared different sets and so forth. And when comparing the vaccinated individuals to those previously infected at any time, we found that throughout the follow-up period, there were 748 cases of SARS-CoV-2 infection recorded, 640 of which were in the vaccinated group and 108 in the previously infected group. So again, for all those people that say that, all those employers that are saying, hey, I know you've been exposed before, but that doesn't matter. You have to get 2 doses. It's like, well, shouldn't natural immunity account for something? Shouldn't our conversation be a little bit more nuanced than that? I mean, the data is clearly right here, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of subjects. Okay, after adjusting for comorbidities, a 5.96-fold increased risk for having a breakthrough infection as opposed to a reinfection was observed. Again, so we have a 5.96-fold greater risk for getting reinfected in people who are fully vaccinated. Now, so again, this is not to say that vaccines don't work. Clearly they work. There was out of 673,000, there was only 600 cases. So do the math. So this has definitely reduced the number of cases, especially in Israel. But this also finds that, natural immunity does work. I mean, my gosh, it is effective. So, and you can do the rates of reinfection. So let's continue on here and dive into some of the conclusions. Now, again, I want to be very careful in sharing this data, especially on YouTube, because I want to be responsible. I want to make sure that the YouTube folks know that I am not here saying immunizations don't work. I am not saying go out and lick the toilet seat in the ICU. I know people who've gotten really sick from this. I know people who have lingering, lasting health complications. There's unknowns with getting this virus, friends. This message really is for people who have already been exposed and are getting pressure from friends and family, for not getting booster shots and all of this stuff. It's like, hey, man, we have proof that natural immunity, you should feel safe around me. Anyway, so when the science changes, our conversation should change, and that's part of what science is about. Is having answering questions and relying upon newly published data to help us address new questions. So these researchers, and again, we want to take this data with a grain of salt. This was a preprint. It's not yet published and third-party, reviewed by editors and all that. But the scientists go on to say, this is the largest real-world observation study comparing natural immunity gained by previous infection to vaccine-induced immunity afforded by the Pfizer mRNA vaccine. Our large cohort, enabled by Israel's rapid rollout of the massive vaccination campaign, allowed us to investigate the risk for additional infection, either as a breakthrough infection in vaccinated individuals or reinfection in previously infected ones, over a longer period of time than has been previously studied. Although in a moment, we're going to challenge this paper in 1 second. So again, trying to hear it from both different perspectives, friends. Our analysis demonstrates that SARS-CoV-2 naive vaccinees, so these are individuals who have not been exposed to the virus but have been vaccinated, had a 13-fold greater increased risk for breakthrough infection with the Delta variant compared to those previously infected when the first event, infection or vaccination, occurred during January and February of 2021. The increased risk was significant for symptomatic disease as well. So friends, I'm not saying one is better than the other, but all I'm saying here in this video, I want to make it very clear for like the 7th time. Natural immunity should count for something. Prior infection, if you had to deal with this virus, for some people it was a cough, for some people it was a headache, for some people it's gray matter shrinkage, for some people they were out of work for a month, right? If you had to deal with that, that should account for something, should it not? Like literally, the science shows that here. So now let's challenge our beliefs, friends, because this is what it's all about. It's hearing things from totally different perspectives. You need to listen to podcasts and news channels and media that you disagree with so that you can hear both perspectives. So this is from our own CDC, all right? Now, this paper did not just sort of corroborate with the recently published paper from Israel. Okay, so this is the Kentucky resident study. This was published by the CDC's Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report. The title of this, as you can see here on the screen, is Reduced Risk of Reinfection with SARS-CoV-2 After COVID-19 Vaccination in Kentucky. Now, what's different about this study, and as what they found here essentially, is Kentucky residents with a previous infection who were unvaccinated had a 2.34 times the odds of reinfection, okay? Now, here's what's a little bit different about the Kentucky resident study versus the data in Israel, is here in the US, as many of you know, we rolled out the vaccines a little bit differently based upon age and risk and all of that. Israel did a quick and rapid rollout. And again, as that large data set in over 780 some odd thousand subjects that we just reviewed found, is they stopped, individuals to be included in that study had to have had 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine before February 28th, okay? Now, in the Kentucky resident study, individuals could have had the vaccination pretty much at any point prior to May or June of 2021. Now, again, what they found is that compared to unvaccinated individuals, vaccinated individuals had a 2.34 times the odds of reinfection. Unvaccinated had a higher odds of being reinfected compared to the people who were fully vaccinated, okay? Now, the difference here with this Kentucky resident study, again, is Delta during, May and June was about 10 to 15% of the cases, according to some of the data back then. States like Missouri, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Colorado had a much higher prevalence of the number of cases that were from Delta. So anyway, understand that, 2 different data sets, but it's so easy to get in this confirmation bias loop. We can, it just happens on the internet. You start reading and then you just really get confirmed into your biases. Now, there's one thing I forgot to mention on the study, and now this really challenged my own biases, is the study in Israel, going back to like the 780,000 subject study. Check it out. Comorbidities didn't influence the efficacy of the vaccine. That, to me, I would have thought for sure that people with hypertension and obesity, because what we've seen in other data sets is potentially that is a factor, but in this data set, it didn't statistically influence the efficacy or the risk for reinfection. Really interesting. So that, to me, of course, I would have thought for sure, like, the obese, the hypertensive, the overweight, the metabolic syndrome, they would have had less protective effect, but evidently they didn't. So again, it's good to challenge your beliefs and biases, friends. So Going back, here's the summary from the CDC. So check it out. You can share this information if you found this helpful. If you're here right now and you're enjoying this content, please hit that like button. And again, I just want to reiterate for our friends on YouTube and so forth, this is not an anti-vaccination message. In fact, I've had several friends as of late who have recently got vaccinated, especially people who have either are on HRT or anabolic steroids or who have done that in the past. That subset of the population seems to be very vulnerable to severe disease. So I've had some friends. Mark Bell has been, very public about this, and getting immunized and all that. So I think, a lot of us, we overstate our health, so to speak, just like we think our house is worth more than it is. We think our used car is worth more than it is. We all think we're sort of healthier than we really are. A lot of people that I work with, they don't even do blood work. Like I say, hey, when was the last time you had labs? Oh, I think like 6 years ago. You should be getting labs all the time. So a lot of us don't even really know where we're at. And so I was a little bit reluctant to post this video. Number one, because it's controversial and it draws a lot of polarizing people from both sides of the perspective and all of that. But also, I don't want to inadvertently, have someone who thinks that they don't have any health issues say, yeah, I'm just going to get the natural course of infection or whatever, and not have the tools at their disposal to help them, and they could get severely ill. So, anyway, friends, so take this with a grain of salt, and let's go on to this article. This was in Science Magazine. The title of this, and all of these are free, by the way, I'll link them. Having SARS-CoV-2 once confers much greater immunity than a vaccine, but no infection party, please. And so, these researchers demonstrate, the power of the human immune system, but infectious disease experts emphasize that this vaccine and others for COVID-19 nonetheless remain highly protective against severe disease and death. Now, that obviously was shown in this data set, right? Out of 673,000 fully vaccinated subjects, there was only like 700 breakthrough cases. And so this is where, again, there's some people on the internet who literally think that they've heard about antibody-dependent enhancement, and that's sort of this idea where if you get immunized from something or if you have antibodies for something, that it enhances the uptake of whatever has the antibodies against. So, for example, SARS-CoV-2, if you have this antibody-dependent enhancement, that these antibodies will increase the uptake of the virus and increase the viral load. That has been shown in animal model studies, but the real-world data about the ADE or antibody-dependent enhancement for SARS-CoV-2 immunizations doesn't seem to be there. So, what I'm seeing here is this conversation is so polarized. And I take a little bit more nuanced approach and, think that, people with risk factors, individuals over the age of 60 should definitely get immunized, because this therapy has been shown to reduce disease severity. Now, I know that's going to irritate some people, because some people think that these vaccines are going to change your DNA and they're going to cause you to grow a third arm. The people who think like that are, in my opinion, just as falling for these logical fallacies compared to people who think we should all double mask for the rest of humanity, right? This is a more nuanced conversation, and we need to understand that that we're all individual. We all have different risk factors and susceptibilities and everything like that. So, anyway, friends, that's where we are. I just want to check in and get to some of your questions here. So, let's see what's going on. Okay, is ivermectin effective? Well, I don't know that I can answer. I really will get in trouble if I start talking about that on this platform. All I can say is I have had some friends who have felt symptoms of a cold, and they found success with that. Okay.